And now for my real thoughts on the lost treasure of Griffon Stone. While my simulated adventure doesn't have a whole lot to it, the story was basically wandering around Griffon City, recapping its history and helping the Griffins to become friends while not finding a lost treasure. It's not as much of a story to tell and retell as this tour that the Gallo with the Schmooze. Not a whole lot of material to work with. But what the episode did was it gave us a much longer, much more interesting discussion that we can have about all of the things that we saw in the episode. I'd have to say this is something that fans of the show have been waiting for a very long time. It answered a lot of fans' questions and put to rest some of their headcanon issues. For one, we finally get the return of the cutie map, something we've been doing without since the beginning of the season. We got to learn on the second mission, something that people have been speculating about is what would happen if the ponies were doing something else important and got called away on a mission, as well as what would happen if the mission only involved a smaller number of the ponies as opposed to using all 6 of them. And we even get to see what a pony is like when she feels left out of an adventure she really wants to go on, and what a pony is like when she's forced to go on an adventure she doesn't really want to do. We got lots of world building, lore building, history, lots of backstories, lots of interesting stuff, and oh yeah, of course, Griffins finally. And whether you like her or not, the return of a very popular villain character, Gilda, as well as her redemption story. We got flashbacks to when Rainbow Dash and Gilda were young and cute and adorable. And we got a villain who isn't a callback to a G1 villain, but is extremely similar in his appearance. Because My Little Pony G1 also had a goat-horned monster creature that was also evil. The only difference being the one we're seeing in G4 having 1 eye, and the one from G1 had 2 eyes. I was having a lot more fun in the first 5 minutes of this episode from every new thing they threw at us and every question that they answered than I had watching yesterday's Discord episode. This one ranks very high so far for the season, and it's going to take something even more special to climb above this one. A lot of people complained last week that the character of Tree Hugger wasn't a very interesting character, that she was boring and one note, but a lot of characters, even members of the main 6, like Rarity and Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie, would be boring one-note characters if we only had the first 2 episodes to judge them by. All characters, whether it's Tree Hugger or Trenderhoof or Shining Armor or Pinkie Pie or Rarity or Fluttershy, take multiple episodes before you can understand their character, their depth, and their complexity. You can't put all of the characters' personality in one episode. And here we see Gilda finally getting another side to her. We had a brilliant Indiana Jones moment where they're hanging off the cliff trying to reach for the idol, and they have to choose between grabbing the idol or rescuing their friends and bringing themselves up to safety. Exactly like the sequence when Indy has Elsa and he's yelling at her, "Give me your hand," and she's trying to grab the idol, and she slips out of his grip and falls. And then Indy falls, and his father catches him, and he's trying to convince him to give up the grail and come get pulled up to safety, and they have to put their relationship ahead of the treasure. Perfect way to do an Indiana Jones reference, and slightly disappointed that there wasn't Daring Do, but it was nice that Rainbow could step into Daring Do's shoes and fulfill her role without needing her to be present in the episode. Although this title was practically screaming for her inclusion, her absence did not make the episode worse. Also, rocks for food. This could explain Pinkie Pie's rock form. Maybe even Pinkie Pie's family feeding the Griffins. Maybe that's why Pinkie knew how to bake these rocks and make them taste better. Or, wait a minute, were these stones or stones? They were stones. Why did they look and taste like stones? I was a bit confused on that particular part of the episode until I listened to it again and again, and then I could clearly hear the C sound in the word stones, not the T sound from the word stones. Although, considering the way that the stones were animated and drawn, it seems very reasonable that I could have misunderstood them as stones. And frankly, the idea of griffins eating stones makes them a more fascinating species than having them eat stones. Either way, Pinkie had the skills to feed the griffins, which I thought was very fascinating. I was also fascinated by the fact that she's so infused about baking that she is excited to take 15 hours just to bake something. That is insanely ridiculous for an amount of time to spend doing just one thing during a 24-hour day. Assuming Equestria has 24-hour days, I mean, it's up to Celestia and Luna's whim how long they want to raise the sun and moon before they complete a 24-hour cycle. But that's heavy headcanon territory. Let's not go there. Also, I can see some shipping between Pinkie and the king of the Griffins, or Griffins in general, since she considered that one king to be kind of a charmer. Although those were words she put in his mouth from her own imagination, it's still very interesting that this is the kind of personality Pinkie's attracted to. So it makes me wonder who will lead the Griffins now. How will Dilda's influence in creating friends lead the Griffin Kingdom into a better way? And what will that kingdom be like the next time we visit it? How will the city grow? And when will we see Dilda or Griffins in general next? We know that Griffins do compete in events like baking contests and major sporting events, and they go to flight camp and so forth. But I wonder if this is something Griffins do after they leave their home and get away from the influence of other grumpy Griffins, or if this is something that they do to represent the Griffin Kingdom. Also, I noticed that a lot of Griffins had G names. This story is something that I've heard quite a lot. There are lots of times when travel to other places gets hyped up. Often you'll read a book or see a movie or read a brochure and you'll get excited to go somewhere. And then when you go to that place, you find out it's run down and abandoned and kind of a ghost town, and it's not upkept. It doesn't look like the way it was advertised, and it ends up being a disappointment. We've seen this in Avatar: The Last Airbender when Aang takes his friends to the desert oasis, and we see that here in the Griffon story, and we've seen it a lot of times in real life as well. I think this kind of plot was also used on The Simpsons, but I'm not quite sure. Griffon Stone is like Ponyville's opposite. It may have a giant tree in the center and a library that got blown up, but that's where the similarities end. It's full of a lot of Ponyville opposites, such as not having any songs, or parties, or cakes, or any kind of fun, or friendship, or anything else like that. Rainbow went into this with a racist attitude, but she wasn't wrong either. Those Griffins really were stingy and jerks. I'm sure what Rainbow said doesn't apply to all Griffins, but it applied to most Griffins and all of the ones that we saw in this episode. Like, even though stereotypes aren't always true, there is truth to stereotypes. There's a reason why they exist in the first place, and you will always find a good number of people who match the profile, no matter how much you try to give them the chance to prove otherwise. Pinty's hair is once again amazing, as it can hold all sorts of crazy things, but it does also leave the question of where the other ponies keep the stuff they hold. Griffin babies are cute. They are super adorable, and I just want to hug one. Granny Pie's name came up again in this episode, and she's a very interesting character. She knows baking, she knows how to deal with things that are scary, and she knows the legend of the mirror pool, making me think she lived a rather interesting life. It also had me wondering, does the map only send you to places with bad food? Is giving Pinkie Pie horrible things to put in her mouth going to be a running gag throughout these adventures? I mean, first she had the muffins, then she had the horrible Griffon Stones. Is every location that the map sends her to going to consist of some kind of horribly poorly baked food that's barely edible? Twilight didn't go on this adventure for the same reason Spike didn't go on the first map adventure. Having Twilight present would have made the adventure way too easy. She could have used teleportation to get herself and the others out of the bottom of the abyss, and she could have used levitation to rescue the idol as well. Dilda has a family member. We met her grandfather. And the final thought I have on my list of thoughts is the fact that Pinkie Pie throwing herself off the cliff to try and catch Rainbow Dash was a huge risk, because now all three are falling and Pinky's completely depending on one of the other two to catch the other two as all three of them are falling. That was putting a lot of faith into a very crazy situation, which was only by the luck of Dilda able to grab some cliffs and support the weight of the other two ponies on the end of the rope, that everything worked out great. This was probably the first time in 5 seasons that I've been worried that something bad could actually happen to the main characters. There was literally a moment there where I didn't think any of them were going to make it out of that situation. Anyhow, that's all of my many thoughts on, my real thoughts on this episode. Thank you for watching, and good night.